everybody, this is Tracy here to recap episode 2 of Queen Sugar, which airs on the OWN network on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. You can catch the replay, I think, of the previous two episodes beginning at 8 p.m., but the actual new episode airs at 10 p.m., and that's on Wednesdays on the OWN network. We pick up in episode 2 following the death of Ernest Bordelon, who was the patriarch of the Bordelon family. And the scene opens up with Nova, and she's working in her garden when when Calvin, who plays the police officer that she's having the affair with, and he walks up and he has come to see her because she hasn't been returning his phone calls. And what I forgot to mention in the last recap, at the end of the show, after Ernest has passed away, we do see Nova ride by Calvin's house, and he and his wife are in the kitchen or living room, but the curtain's open, and Nova is sitting there, and she's watching, them interact, and he's like hugging her, or they're talking and laughing. And so I guess she's feeling some kind of way, in this moment, because I can only imagine your father passes away and the person that you're in love with, you can't really share that moment with them. But Calvin is there to let her know that he is there. He's by her side, and he wants to come to the funeral. And Nova tells him, that's not a good idea. People will recognize you. And then he points out that when his father, who was also a police officer, and I guess he was a very popular police officer, had his funeral, that Nova was there, and Nova counters with, well, I kind of blended in, half of New Orleans was there for your father's funeral, so nobody paid attention to me, but this is going to be a small setting, and so if you walk up, people are going to recognize you, and they're going to wonder, who are you, and, and why are you there? So he lets Nova know that he's there for her, and he wants to help her through this moment, and asks that she please pick up the phone when he calls her. And then he bends over to give her a kiss, and she kind of is reluctant to give him a kiss, but she does eventually kiss him. And you can tell, as he's walking away, she begins to cry. And so I wonder if this is the beginning of the end of that relationship, and if she's realizing that, this probably isn't going to work. Next, we see Nova. She goes to meet George, who is her editor at the newspaper, and she wants to give him ideas about some story ideas that she has, and he wants her to write a story about Charlie and Davis and the scandal that they're going through. And Nova asks him, well, when did we become a newspaper that's trying to keep up with the tabloids and writing about gossip? And he says, when they started making more money than we do, that's when we have to keep up with the times, and that's what people want to write about. But Nova lets him know that in no uncertain terms is she going to write about a personal issue that her family is dealing with, and she lets George know when he's ready to hear about, her stories where she's talking about activism and issues that are impacting the community. He knows how to find her. And then next we have Nova, and she's at Violet's house, and they're going through some old photos looking for pictures to put in the program for Ernest's funeral. And Charlie walks in, and there is a bouquet of flowers, and we learn that the flowers are sent from Charlie's mom. And I think I mentioned in the previous video that I didn't think that Charlie had the same mother as Ralph Angel and Nova, and so we've confirmed that in this episode. And we also learned that Nova and Ralph Angel's mother is actually deceased. I think they pull out a picture, and it's a picture of a boat, and Ernest had named the boat after their mother. So she has passed away. And one more thing we learned in that scene is that Charlie did not grow up with them or lived in the same house with them. She only came to visit during the summer months, and she stayed with them during the summer. And so as they're discussing the funeral arrangements, it's obvious that Nova and Ralph Angel don't really want Charlie to be a part of the planning. And so they're telling about everything that Charlie brings up. Well, did you do this? Did you do that? They're like, oh, that's already done. It's already been taken care of. And when she, speaks out about, she should be a part of the planning also, then Nova announces that they're going to pick out the casket at 3 o'clock, and she's more than welcome to come. And so later we see Nova, and she's talking to Hollywood, asking how Violet is doing since the passing of Ernest. And outside you can hear a commotion, and when they go and look out the window, there's a company coming, and they're bringing tables and linens to set up outside. And she asks Charlie what's going on, and Charlie goes, oh, that's the service that I hired for the repast. And Nova flips her lid, and she's yelling and screaming at Charlie, telling her that we don't hire services to provide comfort to people. We are the family, and the family is going to comfort those in need and in mourning for their father. And then she ends her tirade by telling Charlie that, and we don't honor our father with American Express. And I'll further explain that comment later on when I'm talking about Charlie. But then she tells Charlie that she needs to go and get the people off of their property, and just really nasty. And you can see Violet like standing in the background, and she's watching the interaction. And I really like Violet's role on this show, because she's really the glue that holds this family together, and she doesn't take sides, and she's the voice of reasoning when the siblings are going after each other. So next we're going to talk about Charlie. And when Charlie enters the show, she's out on a morning run, and I think she runs from Violet's house down to where her father's house and the farmland actually is. And if you're familiar with the country, as we call it here in the South, you'll know that you may have sprawling acres of land, and then there might be a house here and a house there, and usually the same family members live in these houses, but the houses are really far apart. And so I think that's what's going on. And so Charlie's out for this run, and she ends up at her father's house, and she finds the key. In the South, people hide keys, under cans, under the doormat. And so she finds the key, and she goes into the house, and she's just rummaging through everything, playing on the piano, looking at pictures, and, pretty much reminiscing. And then we see her sitting at the kitchen table, and she's going through some bills, and she hears some people outside. And when she looks out the window, there's 3 guys out. And so she goes out on the porch and, calls out and asks them what they're doing. And so a guy comes up, it's a white guy, and he introduces himself as Sam Landry. And we learn that Sam Landry, I guess he's like a rich farmer, and he owns a lot of land in Louisiana. And I guess the crop in Louisiana is sugarcane. And well, I'm not even going to go there. I was going to talk about some memories about sugarcane and how my dad used to buy us sugarcane, and we'd eat it raw. Miss those days. But he's there to make an offer to Charlie to buy the land from them. And Charlie senses that he's up to no good, and so she puts on her management role hat and lets him know that she's not a pushover, and she will take his card and get with her sister and brother to see what they think about selling the property. And so then when Charlie first arrived at the house, there was a bunch of notes attached to the door, and she goes through the notes, and we later learned that the notes were left by a guy named Remy, and Remy is the guy that the father was negotiating with to buy a part to get his tractor back up and running. And so Charlie goes to meet Remy to discuss the notes, and she's really surprised to learn that he's her age. He's not an older gentleman. So I guess to find young people that are still in the farming business is a rarity, so she's shocked by that. And he's quite handsome, and I'm thinking maybe he may be a little something later on in the series to get her mind off of Davis and his shenanigans. So the two discuss her dad and the debt that he's in. And Remy tells her that her dad has not farmed in several years, and she's really shocked to hear that. And then she mentions Sam Landry, but when she mentions his name, Remy, cuts the conversation short and tells her that after the funeral, they can get together and talk more about Sam Landry and what she should do with the land. So next we're going to talk about Ralph Angel. And when Ralph Angel comes into this episode, he's in the kitchen with Violet, and they're talking about Blue attending the funeral. And Ralph Angel, as I mentioned in the previous episode, he's overprotective of Blue, and he doesn't want Blue to go to the funeral. And he's saying that, he has enough time in life to deal with death, and right now he just wants him to be a kid. And Micah is also in the kitchen, and he has his iPhone out, and he's watching coverage of the scandal involving his dad. And the people are, making jokes about Davis and, just how tykey he was, and, why a rich guy, has to buy sex and that type of stuff. And Charlie comes in. I think Charlie returns from her run, and she mentions to Violet and Ralph Angel that Remy had left the messages on the door, and she was questioning whether or not, and this was before she met with Remy. So I'm kind of going out of order because I'm trying to keep everybody's parts together to make the video shorter. So she's asking if Remy knows that the father has died, and they reassure her at that point that he has died, and it's then that she makes the appointment to go and meet with him. And Michael's phone is ringing, and it's Davis, but he ignores his dad, and he ignores the phone calls. Okay, the next part. Okay, next we're going to cover when the Bordelon kids were together, and they were at the funeral home planning for the funeral. And so we have the three of them at the funeral home, and they're actually bothering with the funeral director, trying to get the price of everything below cost. Because as you know, Nova, she's a struggling writer. Well, I shouldn't say struggling writer, but she only gets paid when she writes. And we know that she's currently in an impasse with her editor because she won't do the story on Charlie and Davis's issue. And then Ralph Angel, he doesn't have any money because he doesn't have a job. And so Charlie, she wants to pull out her American Express and pay for the whole funeral. And if you remember earlier, I was talking about when Nova went off on her about hiring the caterers to come in to do the repast, and she mentioned that they don't honor their father with American Express. That this is the scene where that comes from, when Charlie tries to pay for the funeral. And so Nova reaches into her purse and she pulls out several credit cards, and she's telling the guy, no, you can put it on these. So it's really kind of embarrassing in a way, the way that they're acting. But Charlie is more embarrassed that her sister has these credit cards that probably only have like a $500 limit on each. And so Ralph Angel, he gets offended because he feels like they're leaving him out of everything, and he assures them that he'll have his part on next Friday if they'll just front him the money. And so I'm thinking, okay, so what are you going to do to get this money? Are you going to go rob another bank, or not rob another bank, but rob another convenience store? Because we know he has no source of income at the moment. And so to settle it, Charlie tells the funeral director to split everything in half, put half on her American Express, and then she throws shade at Nova and goes, and you can put the other half, you can spread the other half across, all of her cards. And so she kind of, gets that dig in. So the next scene has them, and they're going to pick out the casket. And so they're in the demo room, where they have the different caskets, and the funeral director recommends that they get a purple casket, and he tells why he thinks purple would be better. And I think he says something about royalty, but then Nova says no, she likes the white. Maybe Nova was the one that said her father was, no, she said, I'm sorry, Nova wanted the white casket because she said it represented light, and her father was a light, and he's gone on to be in the light or something like that. And so they agree on the white casket. So Then Nova pulls out this pouch, and I don't know what was in the pouch. I'm hoping that it was some soil from her dad's land that she had in this pouch, and that it wasn't some of her weed that she grows in her soil. But she tells the funeral director that she wants to sew this pouch into the lining of the casket. And the guy's like, now wait a minute, you guys not coming up in here. This is a Christian organization. We're not having that voodoo mess up in here. And so Ralph Angel kind of steps to the funeral director in a very intimidating and threatening manner. And so the guy backs down, and he's like, well, we love you guys, and we want, to provide the best service. So if that's what you want to do, then that's what we'll do. And so then they pull out a knife and they go to cut the lining of the casket. And then again, the guy is looking like, these like ghetto backwoods fools don't get out of my funeral parlor. So he's like, that's a demo. You can't cut that demo like that. And then, once again, they look at him and give him this, intimidating glare. And so then the guy say, okay, well, he can have that one, and then I'll just have to get another casket to replace that one. So they cut the lining and put the pouch in, and then, it was sort of ritualistic, the coming together of the three, as they sewed the pouch into the lining, and claim that casket for their father, when 5 minutes ago they were arguing over who was going to pay for it, and dividing up the amount over credit cards. So after they finish wrapping things up at the funeral home, we have, and maybe a few days later, because remember, I'm compounding everybody's scene like into one section. So the next thing we have is Nova and Charlie, and they're out riding, and then they pull up. It looks like the side of the road. They pulled up, and there were these Asian people, and they were selling fresh seafood. And so Nova's like, oh, is that redfish? We'll take all of those, and those crabs look good. We'll take that whole thing of crabs. And then Charlie lifts the lid off of one of the coolers, and the fish are in the water, and they're swimming around. And she jumps, and she's like, oh my God, the fish are still alive. And then, this is Nova's opportunity, to make another dig. And then she was like, of course they're fresh. Like, you've been gone that long that you don't know, that that's how it's done. And so you kind of see Charlie looks at her. So they buy all of this, they buy all of the fresh seafood from these people. And I think that's when Charlie makes the decision that she's going to hire the company that was going to come and set up and serve the people at the repast. And so then we have Violet in Hollywood, and it's late in the evening, probably about 8 o'clock after dinner or something. And they're in their backyard sitting on the back of a boat. And I thought that was cute. They go in the back, and instead of sitting on patio furniture, they climb up on their boat. And so they're sitting on the boat, and you can tell that Violet, she's kind of down about Ernest dying, and she's telling Hollywood. So I guess Violet has legal custody or temporary custody of Blue. And so she's telling Hollywood that she thinks that Ralph Angel is going to try and take Blue away. And, she's talking about, how sad she is that she's the only sibling. Now that Ernest has passed away, she's the only one of their siblings that's still alive. And I guess both of their parents, have passed on. So she's literally feeling like she's all alone in the world. And I can only imagine what a horrible feeling that must be. And then she tells Hollywood, which in this scene we learn that Hollywood is much younger than Violet. And so then she's telling him that, if Ralph Angel takes Blue away, and if he still wants to have kids, he probably should break up with her and go find him a younger woman that he can start a family with. Hollywood is not having it. He loves Violet, and he lets her know he's not going anywhere, and he's happy with the way things are. The scene goes to Micah, and he's playing with Blue, and the phone rings, and they look at the phone, and it's Davis calling again. And Blue tells him that he should answer the phone. Imagine that this little 5 or 6 year old is telling the teenager, grow up and answer the phone and talk to your dad. And so Michael lets Davis know that his grandfather had died, and that they're back in St. Josephine. And I thought that was really odd that they had been there for several days, and Charlie, she was so angry and hurt that she didn't even bother to call Davis and let him know that her father had died. So that let us know that Charlie, she's a mean one. She's mean and cold-hearted. And so after Micah talks to his dad, we see him run outside to where Violet and Hollywood are sitting on the boat, and he asks, is there a gym nearby? And so I guess they tell him where the gym is, because the next scene that we see is Micah, and he's at the gym, bouncing the basketball. And then we see Davis walk in, and so Davis is telling Micah how much he misses him, and that he doesn't like the separation. And we see Charlie arrive, and she's listening to the conversation, and this really sets her off. And so she storms into the gym and goes out on the court and grabs Micah and tell him that they need to leave. And so as they're walking away, Davis, saying, we need to talk, Micah needs me, don't do this. And then Micah stops and he turns around and he goes, no, I don't need you. And so that was kind of hurting, because regardless of what parents are going through, they shouldn't tear the kids away, from the father or from the mother, in cases where the father is the custodial parent. And so Davis uses this opportunity to, he tells Micah, but I need you. And then Micah walks back towards Davis, and Davis pulls out his first championship ring, and he's telling Micah about the night that he won that ring and how much the ring actually meant to Ernest and to him. And he's going on and on, being very self-absorbed. And I'm thinking, as he's talking, I'm like, oh man, Davis, you ruined the opportunity. Instead of talking about yourself and how the most important night of your life was the night you won that championship, you should have been saying that the most important night of your life was when Micah was born. And then Davis goes on and he says, how Micah was just a baby and all of this other garbage. And so this really infuriates Charlie even more. And then she goes between the two and she tells Davis, everything isn't about you. And then she grabs Micah and they storm out of the gym. So the day of the funeral, it's the day of the funeral, and Ralph Angel is grooming for the funeral when Blue walks in and asks if he'll give him a haircut so he can look good for his mom when she arrives. And then the scene cuts away to the mom, and she's at work, and she's a cashier like in a parking garage, and it's really busy. And she's getting ready to leave when the owner or her manager comes up and tell her she has to stay. And she's like, oh no, I'm going to see my son. I finally get to spend time with my son. And the guy says, well, you can spend time with your son some other time, but you need to stay here and make money so you can take care of him. And then she says, but I gotta go, it's really important. And then he tells her if she leaves, then she's fired and she can spend all the time she wants with her son. So then she has to make the decision of whether or not she's going to keep her job or leave. And of course she chooses to stay. And then Violet, back at the house, Violet walks in and she learns that Blue isn't going to the funeral, that he's actually going to be staying with his mom. And she makes some statement like, you mean to tell me that you would rather him go off with that no count, low down mother of his than take him to the funeral? And then Ralph Angel, which I thought it was wrong for her to talk about the lady the way she did, but Ralph Angel lets her know that it's his decision and he doesn't want Blue at the funeral. And Violet, she tells him that, he's too protective of Blue and that he's going to end up wrestling with a world that doesn't have a pedestal for him. The truth is, Ralph Angel knows that she's thinking that Blue is going to turn out like he did, getting in trouble and being a disappointment to the family. So later on we see Blue and he's outside waiting for his mom to come. But by now Ralph Angel realizes that she's not going to come. And so he tells Blue that he has to go to the funeral with him. And so the scene pans away from that and we end up at a church. And Charlie's inside the church and Davis shows up. And she accuses him of not respecting her wishes for him to stay away. But he lets her know that Ernest was his fault, his family also. And so she gets angry and she storms out of the church and Davis follows her out and she's crying and they end up embracing briefly. But she kind of lets her guard down and let him embrace her. And then she pulls away and runs back into the church. And so the last, I think it was the last scene, was they were at the graveyard after the funeral. And Remy is speaking. And I believe that he's speaking, and that's where the title of the episode comes from, and they're talking about the history of the Evergreen, which lets me know that this is some kind of fraternal order of farmers, these guys who are conducting the graveyard service. And I thought it was really nice how everyone at the funeral had on dark colors except for the immediate family. They were all dressed in white, sitting on the front row. And we see Blue's mom walking up in the distance, and he looks over and sees her, and he jumps off of Ralph Angel's lap and runs to greet her. And Ralph Angel is about to go get up and go after him, but then Hollywood stops him and tells him that, now isn't the time. And I thought it was nice that once she arrived, she went into the bike of, so it's like the tent that they have at the graveyard service, and there's probably maybe 30 people there. They have 30 chairs, and people are sitting down, then people start to stand up. And so Blue and his mom, they go into the bike, and then the camera pans from each member, and so you have Hollywood and Violet, they're sitting together on the front row. And then I think Nova turns around, and then we see that the policeman lover man is there, and then it kind of goes to Charlie, and then we can see, in the background that Davis is there, and then we have Blue's mom. And so it sort of shows us the complexities of the different relationships that each one of the Bullalong kids are in. And so the show ends with Nova. Nova was sitting in between Charlie and Ralph Angel, and so the show kind of pans out where she reaches out and she grabs Charlie's hand and she grabs Ralph Angel's hand, and it kind of demonstrates a bond that's not going to be broken even in death or whatever they're about to face moving forward with the death of their father. So that's it for episode 2. Once again, great soundtrack. If you have the opportunity, go on the OWN website, because it's either the OWN app or the OWN website, and you can download the music from each episode, and I believe you can download it for free. But just a great soundtrack, great storyline, and I'm looking forward to reviewing episode 3. So until then, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments, let me know what you thought about the show, if I forgot to include something, and rate the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.